Good morning, Привет. Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you everyone for joining our presentation today on balancing family and work while we're working from home. My name is Jeff Scott and I'm the CEO of Section 810 Communications based outside of the New York area. And it's my pleasure to have a group of panelists today as we have an interactive discussion on really some best practices on balancing family and work in this new era that we're all experiencing. A couple quick housekeeping items before I introduce the panelists. Many of you on the line may have been participating in the webinar series we've been conducting. This is number 6 in the series, and we've been delighted to conduct these free sessions and hopefully provide some valuable information that can help you during this time. Everyone's line is on mute. Since we have typically large audiences from all over the world, you are on mute. However, we want to give you the opportunity to engage with us and interact with us. You'll notice in your dashboard that you have a chat questions area where you can ask questions of the staff. Feel free throughout the presentation to type in your questions. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be spending time looking at those questions and providing answers out loud for the audience to hear, or we'll type in questions or the answers directly to you. Now, you'll also have an opportunity to engage at different points through some surveys we have and polls, but also by simply raising your hand. If you notice in your control panel, you've got an icon in the form of a hand. So right now, just to make sure that everybody can hear my voice clearly, and if you can see the welcome slide we have, go ahead and raise your hand. Click on that icon. Perfect. I see most of the hands going up. There's nothing worse than doing a webinar and no one can hear you. So I appreciate everyone doing that. And again, it's a pleasure to have all of you here today. Section 810 Communications, as an organization, we provide training online and on site when we're allowed for organizations in the area of soft skills, such as communication, leadership, DISC personality assessments. If you'd like some information on who we are, in the handout section, you can download a brochure on who we are as an organization. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists as we go ahead and turn on our cameras so we can say hello to you. I'm delighted to have several people with us from around the world. We've got representation from the US, from the UK, and from Russia with us today, and I'm delighted to have all of the panelists. And I'll ask each one to introduce yourself a little bit, maybe a little bit about what you do, and also your family situation, since we're all very different in how we're coming about this balancing family and life. So Sue, I'm going to start with you, and I've had the opportunity to know Sue only for a short period, but she focuses on diversity and inclusion at PwC in Switzerland. Sue, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Jeff, and hello everybody and welcome. Before we came on the call, we were just laughing, saying it was quite nice to actually find a top and iron it and put some perfume on to bring that work pizzazz. So great opportunity. So my name's Sue Johnson. I work for PwC. I help clients become more inclusive and diverse. I work in the Swiss office, but I'm actually based in the UK. So my parenting profile is I work, my husband works, we're a dual career. We have 2 children, age 7 and 10. So being in the UK, we are still homeschooling and have been for, this is our 5th week. I'm hoping one child might go back part-time in 4 weeks and the other one potentially in 8 weeks. But so lots of learnings from just juggling schooling, working and homing. So looking forward to hearing your comments and suggestions and sharing some top tips I have with you. Hope they're helpful.
Outstanding, and I'm delighted to have you with us, Sue. Thank you again. Allison, you're the veteran in this. Allison and I have had the opportunity to know each other for more years than we both like to admit. And Allison was a panelist in one of our first webinars that we conducted on best practices in this new environment working from home. Allison is the co-founder and managing partner at Lotus 823, but Allison, thank you again for joining us. You're on mute, Allison.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeff, and welcome everyone. Hopefully you get some good tips out of this webinar. I'm a managing partner at Lotus 823. We're a digital marketing and public relations agency. My background is in HR, and I'll be sharing some tips with you from some tips that I collected from our team members about how they're balancing work with family. I happen to have 3 children, 2 are older and 1 is 13. So he's homeschooling, and we're pretty fortunate that he's self-sufficient, but of course we do have to check on him. And, you know, there's lots of interruptions in the house throughout the day.
I know how that goes. Great. And thank you again, Allison, for being here. And Yekaterina Shkolnikova, or otherwise known as Kate for me. But Kate and I have had the opportunity to work together for a number of years. She's based in Russia. And Kate, you are one of the unique ones on our panel as far as the age of your son with the family. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting, Jeff. Hi, everyone. My name is Ekaterina Shkolnikova, and I hope you will enjoy today's webinar. I work in World Fund, which is a hedge fund in Moscow office, but I manage human resources for our European offices as well. My family situation is I'm married. We are now currently, during current time, staying in Sochi. My husband is also working from home, and I have 15-month-old son who is sometimes joining my video conferences. And we also have 2 dogs, and one of them is just snoring under my knee, so who's fun.
So at some point we may get a cameo from either your 15-month-old son or one of your dogs, I'm sure. So that's great. Well, I thank all of you for joining. From my perspective, I have a very large family. My youngest son, who lives with me, is 18 years old and just finishing his senior year of high school. So I've been through a number of years of working from home when my children were younger. But again, the 4 of us have various circumstances that we're working with in terms of our family situation. So as far as the topics we'd like to discuss with the group today, there's about 6 different areas that we feel are appropriate to discuss as we go through this whole concept of balancing family and work. So we're going to dig into each of these a little bit. What is the whole concept of juggling? Let's talk about that concept. The 3 R's of a couples contract. And Sue, you have some great thoughts I'm excited to dig deeper into on that. How do we go about scheduling for both work and family, just like we schedule things in the office? Now the office is home. Self-care, how do you turn off at the end of the day? And again, any questions you have on these for any of the panelists directly, please bring them to us. And then how do you keep family as a priority? You know, that's something that a lot of people are really struggling with. How do we make sure that nothing suffers? So when we talk about juggling, that's one of the biggest challenges. I think we've all been tested and stretched in terms of how do we do all of this? I'm on a Zoom call now, but I've got homework at 11 o'clock and I've got to take care of lunch and dinner. And, you know, Yekaterina, I'll start with you because, again, you've got a 15-month-old. Talk about juggling from your perspective. How are you managing?
Well, it's been challenging at the beginning because when we just started to work from home, it was hard to manage my time of my husband, time of baby sleep. So what we came up with is proper planning. So I usually inform my family and those who are staying with us in advance about my schedule for the next day. That's how I usually plan my next day. So for example, I just say that I have calls from 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Please do not disturb me during this time. So I will be able to join you for lunch only. So you're with David for now, and I'm on my calls and with dogs at home. It works, but sometimes, of course, we have emergencies like, for example, even now we just started webinar and David just woke up outside and my husband brought him home and he's just taking bath, so which was not supposed to happen. So it always happens.
Yeah, life, it's hard to plan things anymore in this world. So your kids are a bit older than Kate's, but I'm sure you've got that whole juggling thing also because you've got 2 kids right in that middle of school age where I'm sure you're busy becoming a school teacher as well as a professional.
How we've done it with my husband is, you know, you play to your strengths. The morning's very much about arithmetic, writing, and reading. And so my husband does all the math stuff. I'm not so good, but the afternoons are much more around making Roman shields, science projects with bubbles, making crazy obstacle courses around the garden. And so I do far more of that. And so we try and shift our day around playing to the kids' energy levels and also ours. But yeah, play to your strengths. Yeah, it's how you
That makes
survive.
sense. That's a good point, playing to your strengths. I agree with that. Years ago, when my kids were younger, and again, I have 9 kids, so there was a time I had 8 kids, 13 and younger, and I was working from home. And so we weren't in a pandemic, but it was a concept of how do you balance that all out? I found that sometimes giving my kids the first part of my day, unless I had scheduled calls or client meetings, giving them the first of my day kind of put them at ease and allowed them to move along to do their things so that I had a little bit more focused time. That was one of the things that I found helpful. Allison, you had something different you told me the other day with your team, where you have some people on your team with young children, and you said when you're doing internal calls, kids are welcome. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we have employees that have small children, and we welcome and encourage them bringing the children on the video calls in particular, because we love to see them. But yeah, if they have an external call, we do ask that, you know, they try not to have the kids around. But I think that everyone is in sort of the same, you know, they're in the same situation. So
Right.
I think it's really understandable even for clients if there is, you know, a child on the call or a dog barking, where I think in the past working from home, people wouldn't expect that. But I think given the circumstances, it's, you know, everybody's kind of expecting it.
Yeah, I agree. And it seems to me when we were in an office environment, it was a very sterile environment, right? We didn't expect dogs or kids or spouses running around, anything like that. And in this new normal, I think more things are expected. I found that overall, it's not the worst thing. People overall have been going about it pretty well. How would you say, Allison, your team's reacting? Are they responding well to this as far as this new normal and incorporating their kids into some of the work activities, if you will?
I think, yeah, I think that they're all adjusting to it, and we're a very, you know, we're a small company and we're a very tight-knit group. So we all really, like I said, we all like to see the children and the dogs, and we're always taking our, you know, our computers and showing, you know, what's going on in our house and that sort of thing. So I think we're all adjusting. We also have a lot of flexibility, where some people have a small child and they need to be with them for certain hours. I see Kate's dog.
There's the dogs.
So yeah, so we adjust accordingly. You know, if you have a client call that has to be done at a certain time, then you need to be available for that time. But other than that, we offer a lot of flexibility, because you need to spend time with kids doing schoolwork. Kind of like, you know, Sue said, her husband handles this part of the schooling, and she handles the other part of the schooling. So you know, we're really flexible with that, and I think companies have to be. I can't imagine companies that aren't flexible when there's children involved.
I agree. And I know the teachers of the world appreciate that too. One of my daughters is a 5th grade teacher. And one thing she said to me is, Dad, there's only so many things I can do during the day with the kids to keep them engaged. And I'm trying to come up with ideas, having guests come in or do some different things on Zoom or video calls so that we can go ahead and have that engagement. So the role of parents, those of us that have kids that are in school, the teachers certainly appreciate that as well, I'm sure. Let's transition over and discuss something more that has to do with partners, those of us that have others, you know, spouse or partner in the home. And so you brought this up as the 3 R's of a couples contract. I'd love to hear more about that, especially with your experience with inclusion and diversity initiatives. You work with, I'm sure, people all around Europe.
So this is rooted on basically what happens right now in dual careers, because living and breathing one. Because if you look, for example, the research talking about women do on average, I think, is it more than 2 hours unpaid work a day? And lots. I love the article recently about homeschooling, and when you ask men, 90% of men say they are leading the homeschooling initiative, whereas when you ask women, 3% of women think men are leading the homeschooling initiative. So this is not about who's right and who's wrong, it's just different perspectives. And my learning is you really need to think about what's your contract with your partner, and now's the time to really rewrite it in terms of, look, how are we going to operate? Because one thing about this virus is it's so democratic. We're all in the same situation. You can be CEO, you can be at the bottom of the hierarchy, but you're all with kids at home with dogs and trying to make it all work, parenting, schooling and homing. And so when you're rewriting this couple contract, I think the first thing is how you're going to approach it. And that's like, find the right time. When are you both in the space to be able to give this perhaps challenging conversation the time it needs? It's not when you're both tired at the end of the day when the child's just woken up. And also say, you know, I want to talk about this. This is what we're going to talk about. So people know in advance, because quite often people just kind of go, ugh, and it's all this crisis of emotion, and that's not going to work. And if the time comes and it's not right, then reschedule. And you as a partner to really actively listen to the other person and recognize this is all about baby steps. And that's what I really like, this 3R approach. And I've stolen it from the ILO, who've done all the research around unpaid work. And it's about recognizing, reducing, and redistribute. And if I can talk about some stuff that we've done at home, because quite often the habits that you fall into, particularly with parenting with younger children, you keep with them for the rest of your life. So for example, the mums on maternity leave, they tend to get up in the middle of the night, and when they go back to work, they continue to get up in the middle of the night. It's things like, you know, then who does the pickup from school, the washing, etc. But recognizing, so what additional tasks are there now we're home? So for us, we had things like the schoolwork support. There's the lunch preparation. We prepare over 80 meals a week. And there was a real crisis in the UK around toilet roll availability about a month ago. My main concern was around dishwasher tablet availability, because it goes on at least 3 or 4 times a day. You know, it's things like, how do we do shopping? Because there was no food, and it was, you have to queue. It takes you 3 to 4 hours to do a weekly shop now. We support 4 neighbours who were shielding to do their weekly shopping. And so, you know, we both have aging parents who couldn't get medicine in the first month. And so we talked about how we're going to manage this. So recognizing what tasks there are. But the big thing is the R about reducing, because you cannot maintain your level, I use the word hygiene or standards, because to be frank, we used to have a cleaner and we don't anymore. I don't want someone coming into my house. And so in terms of what tasks the children have to do, how we do the cleaning, you know, we reduced it that downstairs it gets pretty disgusting after a few days, but upstairs I can wait a few weeks before the floor gets washed. And so, you know, be kind to yourself. And what are you going to stop doing? You know, it's okay to have ready meals a couple of times a week or get a takeaway from the local place. You know, no one has to have 5 fresh vegetables a day. You know, what can you reduce doing in terms of things less frequently? But also then the thing is redistribute. So I've got a 7 and 10-year-old, and they have to lay the table and they do the drinks, and they clear the table. But now I'm like, please put it in the dishwasher. It sounds silly, but it's one less thing I have to do. When I'm putting washing on, I'm like, okay, who's going to hang the washing out? And you give them a choice. You don't say hang the washing out. You say, do you want to prepare the vegetables or hang the washing out? And so the kids see it as something that they have to do. It's not so they have a choice. They do something to add to the value. And I think that's really taking us forward in terms of there's less pressure on the parents to do all that stuff. Meal preparation, we share the meals in the week for lunch between the 5 of us, and you have to smile and really embrace some interesting nutritional and dietary menu options. You know, an omelette by a 7-year-old tends to have more egg shell than egg, but you know, they're learning life skills. So to me, it's also being kind to yourself as a person and a parent. This is such a short part of our children's education lifespan. And so it's enjoying the time we have together, but recognizing perhaps the learning isn't of the educational level we'd want, but we're doing things in different ways.
Yeah,
So,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you mentioned a couple things. One is playing to your strengths. You mentioned that before, but I think that's the case with this also. Where does it make the most sense? And that whole redistribution, you're right. 3 people picking up the load of 1 person makes it really easy for the 1, and it's not that much of a hardship for the 3. And then the other thing I really like that you said is really the concept of getting people to take ownership of a contract. When you say to the kids, and I know this with my own kids too, not just do this, but listen, this or this, which do you prefer? And letting them pick something, because now they have a little bit more ownership in it because they selected what it is they're doing. I think those are really good. I'm curious, Allison, have you done anything? And again, a contract can be anything. I know people have written contracts. Some do the pinky promise as we have on screen. Or tell me about with you and your husband, because I know your business partners also. How's that work in your family, or is it really just on a looser level?
I would say that it's on a looser level, and both of us are like truly partners. We share all responsibilities in the house, but like Sue said, David is better at the homework piece, so he helps with that. But I make sure every day that I make our son breakfast, and I actually sit down with him, and then every day for lunch we meet together. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, I have a walk scheduled so that the three of us will go outside and walk. So it's kind of funny. I almost feel like we're spending better quality time together than we did in the past, because otherwise we have so much to do, places to run, and because you're kind of, you're quarantined to your home, it seems to me that we're spending a lot more time together playing games. And speaking to Sue's point about cleaning, I also had a cleaning person, and so now we're all having to pitch in, and somebody vacuums, somebody mops, and our son is starting to learn how to clean the house and do other things outside. So there's things that he wouldn't have done as much of. He does have chores weekly on a normal basis, but now he has a lot more, and I think it's been great in that respect. It's been great.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Kate, I'm going to come to you in a minute when we talk about scheduling, but I want to go through a quick poll here just to make sure the audience is still with us here and get some feedback. We want to go into a quick survey here. Let me launch this. And the question is, have you had a conversation with your partner, family, to ensure that the tasks are being fairly distributed? So take a look at the poll that's on your screen right now, and let's just take a few moments to look at that. Either yes, we discuss it daily, or periodically we talk about this, or we only talk about it if there's a problem, or nope, never discuss this at all. So I'm just curious with the audience that we have, how are you dealing with this as far as activity or task distribution within the home? Let's take just a moment here. Okay, so as we close this out here, 764.29. So we would, based on the audience, 7% of you said that you're discussing this daily. It's an active, regular discussion. 64%, the majority of you say we talk about it periodically. So it's not an everyday thing, but it is discussed. 29 said that you talk about this only if there's a problem, but you're still talking about it. So almost a third of you. And none of you, 0%, said this has never been discussed. So kudos to everybody. It shows that there's a good level of communication here. And I know, Kate, that you had said that that's one of the most important aspects in this whole world of working from home, and that's in communicating, scheduling things. And talk about that a little bit, again, with a young child at home and a husband who's also working from home. You said that scheduling is the most important thing. Talk about that from your perspective.
Well, from my perspective, I do like planning, and when everything is planned, it's basically better to organize. Again, as I said, like I inform about my schedule, my family on a daily basis. But if my husband also have some work to do, he also informs me. I noticed that the most difficult part in general for people is to ask someone to do something, because we also face it when we need to do cleaning, somebody has to put dishwasher on, etc. We have 2 dogs. I clean our house on a daily basis, and it happens usually in the mornings, but my husband's actually responsible for garbage. And our guests who are staying with us, they're usually responsible for dishwasher. We didn't really discuss it, but it came up naturally when I just started to ask them to do it. I said, like, honey, can you just like take the garbage away, please? I did it a couple of times, and then it became naturally. If my husband if I'm working and my husband is out for a walk with David, but he needs to do some sports, we also discuss it, because I understand how it's difficult to spend time with a 15 months old, like on a daily basis, and my husband needs to do his exercises. So That day we just hire a babysitter. Thanks God she's living in our place, so we just on another floor. We just bring David to her, and that's it. This way we avoid conflicts because we just discuss it in advance. Again, we have our guests staying with us. There is a lot of dishes, so I had to ask like few times to put dishwasher on, and then it starts to be naturally. Although sometimes my husband was frustrated a little bit that we have so many women in one place and there are so many dishes. I said, like, you just need to ask. You don't need to be irritated. You just need to ask and respect. Because for some people, it's normal to have dishes dirty, and it's fine. And some people are not used to clean the house every day. Again, it's fine. It's just my problem that I like to be clean and I like to like hoover it every day because I hate like all this stuff fur, whatever. But I love dogs, but I hate fur. So it's just you need to plan, you need to respect others, and you need to understand that others do not think about the same problem as you do. And it's interesting, but it's not obvious to other people.
No, you're right. It's not obvious. We do a lot of teaching here on the DISC personalities, and everybody is different. And one person may be incredibly methodical and organized in the way they manage their personal life, and someone else is much more haphazard. They forget their keys on a regular basis, and the other one has all their shoes lined up in color coordinated fashion. So, and then we can really get on each other's nerves. So I think that respect element that you talk about, that's huge. Is just understanding where someone else is coming from. That whole concept of having empathy for someone else and putting yourself in their shoes is really important, because we are stuck with each other a little bit more now than we used to be. And so that communication, being on the same page is really important. I found, and especially talking to friends, this comes into play also with resources in the house. When I worked in an office, if I wanted to use a conference room, I would reserve that conference room. Well, now we have people that may have multiple family members competing for the same resources. I need the bedroom that does video conferencing. I've got a friend who has 2 grown children who are at home with him, plus his wife, and all 4 of them work. And they have one area that's really conducive to doing a video call, and they have to write out that schedule. I've got a call at 2 o'clock. So that respect and understanding others is really important. Allison, you talked about before, you have a walk scheduled today, so to talk about that a little bit, scheduling those things.
I think that if we don't schedule it, it doesn't happen. So even sometimes when we do schedule, it doesn't happen. But I try to do it because otherwise, we don't have that time together. We're both just busy working all the time. And
and there we have him. Hello.
So yeah, we schedule those kind of things, and even playing games, I schedule that sometimes. I feel like our 13-year-old needs attention during the day. He's in the same situation that we are in quarantine. We all, are bored with being home and missing our friends and socializing. So we try to be together with the family as much as possible.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And transitioning over, one of the things we talked about was the whole concept of self-care. I think you said in the first webinar we did that you actually have team walks on FaceTime, to combine being connected to the team, but also making sure you're exercising.
We have. I would say we haven't done it as much lately, but yes, I've definitely been on walks and spoken with some of the team members, and they do it as well. It's just a way to get some exercise in, but you're still getting your work done. But I would say that it's probably more casual conversations than actual work conversations, because you often need your computer in front of you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for you in the UK, I'm curious on this, because I know the UK and all countries, we have different levels of lockdown, and here and I'm using that term maybe in the wrong way, different types of isolation and social distancing. Here in the US, it's by state and sometimes even within a state. I know in the UK, I think you were limited to 1 hour of exercise once a day to get outside. How are you managing that there? How do you manage staying taking care of yourself, staying active and things along those lines?
So it's actually, we've moved to the second stage just from Monday, and they've now said that you can have, unlimited time outside. But with the hour, you really had to pick your time and what you did in terms of, the exercise and getting your family to go outside. We're privileged. We live in a house in a village, so we have a garden. But so my experience of lockdown will be very different, for example, to my colleagues in Geneva, who are in apartments where, 80% of the population in Swiss cities live in apartments. And I think then access to the outdoor space would have been very different. But I think, I know we're going on to later, at the end of the day, the challenge that I've found and my colleagues have found is finding that time to stop, because there's always another email you can write. And I think what's harder is, particularly when computers are in our living spaces, because we're not used to working from home, is how do you stop and have that mental well-being and break? And so I love the idea of scheduling a walk, because it doesn't happen all the time, but if it's not in your schedule, there's probably no chance of it happening.
Yes.
But it's having that physical action of, putting your computer away, putting it in a cupboard, out of sight, out of mind, or getting someone to phone you to kind of say, look, it's the end of the day, now it's time to do something else. It's all these little things that are nudges to make us find that gap, because we're not designed to work 15-hour days. We need to switch off, and that helps our mental well-being hugely.
I agree, and I know we're going to come to that in just a couple of minutes here as far as that whole concept of switching off. The other thing I found here with the whole exercise, everybody says yes, exercise, and we had a session a while back where we talked about routine, and some people are very emphatic that you absolutely have to have a routine. Get dressed in your business clothes, do this at a certain time of day, and some people do really well with that, and others really don't do well with that. I've spoken to people that said routine, the only letters I see in the word routine are R-U-T, rut, because a routine for them means they're stuck in a rut and they need flexibility. One day they work out or they go to work in their sweats, and the next day they dress up more. One day they exercise first thing in the morning, the next time it's lunchtime. I think the key is make it work for you, and to Kate's point, your family. Have that respect for other people, but do what works for you, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to this. I was curious, we're going to go through another quick poll here, and it has to do with staying active and exercising. So when we take a look at this poll, since you've been working from home, how has your own exercise routine become versus what it was when you were working in the office? Just curious, how many of you would say no change at all, I'm just as active as I was before? How many would say much less active? And how many would say I'm more active? Because it's funny, this working from home, some people are loving it and some people are absolutely hating it. So when it comes to exercise, take a few seconds here. When it comes to exercise, are you finding that you're about the same as you were before, or you're exercising much less, or you're much more active? Okay, so we'll close this down. Wow, this is really interesting. So just for everyone to see some of the results, 9% of you, just a small percentage, said no change. It's about the same as it was before. And the rest is split right down the middle. 45% said you're much less active than before, and 45% of you said you're much more active. It'd be interesting to see how many have it schedulized in that routine and how many are doing it more flexibly. Okay, that's interesting to see that. And again, to the audience, thank you for participating in these polls. A couple more topics we're going to discuss here. I know we've got about 20 minutes left in the session, and I want to remind everyone to feel free to type in questions for us. We'll be looking at those questions in just a few minutes, so feel free to type those in as we go through here. So you were just mentioning switching off at the end of the day. Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think for some people it's easier than others. What have you found is helpful for you to have that buffer space or that transition line from work to home?
I love when commutes are measured in steps, not miles or kilometers. So we go for a family walk, almost 5 o'clock, and it keeps us that hour before dinner time at 6. So it's like I say, having an activity where everyone downs tools and gets out, and then you do something about 16, 17 times. It becomes a habit, And so doing it, every day, it's something that now I don't have the groaning of, oh, do we have to go for a walk? It's almost like we're going. So there's that. I think it's, I love the e-cocktails I'm having with my colleagues. In some ways, I feel much closer to some colleagues because I've seen virtual house tours, I've seen in their kitchens, we've discussed various food processes. And so it's having team members also saying, you emailed me last night at 8 o'clock, why was that? Could it have waited? So challenging each other. But I think the big one is putting your computer down and also making a list at the end of the day. These are things that still I need to do, but then I won't forget and I'll do them first thing tomorrow. So everyone has a different technique, but it's finding something that works for you and sticking to it because it's so important. And I think particularly people who are on their own, they haven't got that social life or they can't go to the gym, and they're the ones that I tend to worry about more because with a family, you tend to be dragged away come what may.
Yes, I agree. And you mentioned, with technology, it's a blessing and a curse, right? We've got the ability to do something like this, or we're communicating with people from dozens of countries all at the same time. But then there's that other aspect where this is always right next to me, and an email can come in like that in the middle of the night with a large family. I keep my phone next to me all the time in case my kids need me for something. And with that, that means I can also get email alerts and different things at any time of day or night. That separation is hard. Many of us used to use our commute as that buffer space. I've had times maybe a 30-minute drive. That's like perfect. Just enough to get out of work mode and transition to come home. Allison, we talked about this recently. And again, you're an owner of a business. And so you're living and breathing your company along with your husband. And you said this is hard for you.
It is. It is. I would like to walk the talk, but we have made it a habit to shut our computers at 5 o'clock. But we do have our phones and we do get notifications. And every day we swear that we're going to stop checking emails and that sort of thing after hours or before hours. But we're not good at balancing it, to be honest. We check often.
Yeah, it's a hard habit to get out of, to shut that down. And I found the same thing. Sometimes it's hard for me to just turn it off and to not do that. So I agree, it is a challenge. Kate, what about for you? Again, you're working from home, your husband's working from home, you've got a young son, and you said you have other people in the house with you also. How do you manage that transition? How do you go home from work?
I just have a drink. Yeah, that's actually easy transaction and doesn't take much time. But in general, again, I plan my work. So if like I had like this week, I had 2 days of constant meetings. So I had meetings like from 10 to 1 and then from 3 up to 6:30. So I had only 2 hours break. During this break, I tried to have lunch, spend time with my husband, and I just don't answer, like I don't do like analytics work or whatever. I just don't sit down. But then when I don't have meetings, I try to spend time with my family. So I do plan when I spend time in front of computer, and I know when I can just go out and be with my family. Somehow I actually learned it from my previous manager in Renaissance Capital. And one day she was having drinks at home and she just said, like, just switch off your BlackBerry. She said, like, I don't need you to respond me now. It can wait. So I do check my emails, but I just like filter it. If urgent, I just log in back and respond. I did have like situation recently when I had to sit and work until like 10 o'clock in the evening in front of the computer. I did explain it to my husband. I said, like, listen, this is an emergency. Please take care of David and we'll just manage something for tomorrow. We'll call a babysitter so you can have some rest as well, because he spent actually the whole day with him. So that's it. It's just in your head. Like you need to plan it. So I know that after this webinar, again, I'll go have a drink and that's it. My day is over. I can still check my emails, but I'll have rest.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to what we said before too. It's what works for you. And Tuesday may not be the same as Wednesday. I know for me, there's days that I'm working up until midnight doing some different things. And there's other days I say I have to cut off and do that. Sometimes I'll go out just to go for a walk, or I'll go out on my motorcycle just for a little bit and then come back to get a physical transition, to walk back in my front door and say, okay, now I'm home, to make that separation. If I'm having a glass of wine in the evening, I typically say no more emails tonight, because that's a challenge when people are mixing home and work. We have to be careful we're not too tired when we're doing emails, because sometimes the normal governor we have on what we say or what we type can be challenged if we're a little bit too tired or something else is going on. So I think it's just making that transition, because if everything becomes gray, it's typically not the nicest, right? We want to have some separation. And we're going to talk in just a moment about the whole concept of focusing on family. We've got about 15 minutes left in our scheduled time, but another quick poll, last poll of the session here, and that is in regards to working remotely in general. How many of you would prefer to work remotely more in the future? Again, as we've been coaching and talking to different people, some say, yes, I would only like to do remote work. Others are on the opposite end of the spectrum saying, absolutely not. Get me out of here. I want to go back to my office. Or what about in the middle? Maybe you prefer more than you had it before, but you still want some office time. Or maybe you say, no, I'd like the office, but just once in a while working from home. So take a minute just to look at that, and let's get some responses to the work from home preference. Another second too, and we'll close the poll. Okay, great. So let's close that. From a results standpoint, about 13% of you said that yes, you prefer only working remotely. This is interesting because the first webinar we did about 7 or 8 weeks ago, people were saying, I can't wait to get back to work. 63%, the majority of you said that you prefer to work home more than before, but you still want some office time. 25% said, nah, just once in a while working from home, but you really want to spend more time in the office. Absolutely none of you said that you didn't want to work from home at all, get me out of here. That's a good sign. So people are actually adapting well. 0% said no, office only, no more of this. That's interesting. But again, so 76% said, yeah, I'd like to have more remote time than before, which says that we're adapting well. And overall, this has been going well as a transition. So Allison, I'm going to ask you on this one. We talked about this the other day, keeping family a priority. Today's session is all about balancing family and work, but at the end of the day, jobs do change, companies do change, and family hopefully should be forever, right? So talk about keeping family a priority. You had some ideas and thoughts that I think would be great.
So while it might not be part of the business day when you shut down at the end of the day, I spoke with some of the people that we work with, and they're doing things like using Jackbox, which is something where you can use your device and play with friends and family. So it's a way to stay connected to people. We have someone else on our team that has family dance parties. So they go on Zoom and they play music and they dance together, which I think sounds really fun. So I think there's a lot of that, but we also consider the people that we work with part of our family. It's our work family, but we're all really close. So we do things like we'll have a happy hour at the end of the day, like Sue said, and that's really fun because we don't talk about work. We try not to talk about COVID. We try to share, fun stories or things that are going on. And we also do something called Coffee Talk, which is, we do it twice a week. We spend 15 minutes and you get paired up with an individual randomly, and we spend time talking to each other. And it's really nice. It's a way to stay connected to our work family. But I think that there's a lot of people doing things after work too to stay connected with their families.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just to, for that family that does the dance parties, today is in the US anyway, it's National Dance Like a Chicken Day. So the chicken dance, this is the national holiday for that. So just let them know, give them a little bit something extra to work on. But the Jackbox, or Jackbox, that's something that I just experienced for the first time. One of my daughters said, hey, I've got kids that are in different states as they're living on their own. So we had a bunch of us on video. And so we're looking each other on our computer screens. And then we're playing this game on our phone. We were hysterical, laughing, but it was a way just to connect with my kids. We talk about family, sometimes extended family. I've got an 84-year-old mom, and she lives in New Jersey. I've got a sister in New Jersey, in Florida. I'm in Connecticut. So my mom doesn't see all of us on a regular basis until this. Every week we do video calls now, and she has said, I'm spending more time with you guys now than I did before. I want to make sure she wasn't lonely. So we set these up, and each week one of us will go through showing pictures from the 1960s, 70s, old family pictures, and we're having a great time doing that. So you're right. I think putting focus on something that we never could do before, we just didn't spend the time, is really good. So what kind of things are you doing over there in the UK? Tell us about what this is looking like for you.
So in the UK, there's a big pub quiz culture. And so, this is where teams of friends or family go to the pub on a Monday night or a Thursday night. And obviously that's lost. So you're seeing a lot of family quizzes. So on a Sunday at 5 o'clock, we do a quiz and we rotate it between my siblings and my parents. And it's just lovely that, with our age kids, people are researching what's happening in their school. And so it's becoming quite competitive, but there's some classic questions. And so like you say, it's the little things. I bought my parents an Amazon Alexa because I wanted to make sure that I could see them and vice versa. And we're talking more now as a family, and we're a close family than we have before. And people talk about going back to normality. When we go, to me, we can't go back. We have to go forward. And I really hope we keep all the great things about this time, because it's so easy to focus on the negative. But actually, I think we've all shared examples of how, we're feeling better, feeling healthier, we're exercising more, we're commuting less, and we're connecting to the people that are really important to us. And so to me, it's making sure I don't lose that, along with making sure my kids continue to load the dishwasher. All these things. We need to keep the good stuff, because there's a lot that's come out of this.
I completely agree. Kate, how about for you? Anything specific as far as just making sure family's a priority from your perspective?
Well, I actually spent this time trying to enjoy my current family, because I used to live with my parents for quite a long time. And because I was commuting daily to work, and during the weekend I used to be tired, so I didn't actually spend time with my son and husband at all. So now I actually enjoy spending my time with my husband. We are playing games, actually, just like physical games, and then we just watch movies together. I play with David. He started to call me mom, at least. So previously I was a stranger to him because he didn't really see me at all. But
great.
with my family, just usual calls over the phone. And and actually I do keep in touch with my colleagues. I set up calls every Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, just 30 minutes, coffee talks. Like small, we just chat. We spoke about how you put clothes in your closet. And that actually was really interesting, because people do pack their socks in a different styles. I didn't know that. So you can actually find out interesting things in informal chats. Yeah,
you absolutely can. And you're right. I think those coffee talks are great ideas, or whether it's virtual happy hour, it doesn't matter what it is, just being social and being connected to people. I personally hope that we come out of this stronger than before. I've talked to a lot of people that have said, I'm getting back to basics. What are the real important things in life, the deeper things, whether it's relationships or just getting to themselves better. There's an element that can be good through all of this, because it forces us all out of our comfort zone. It's a matter of what we take with us when things do return to, and I hate to even say normal, because normal really is just a setting on a clothes dryer. There is no such thing as normal anymore. But let's do this as we wrap up for the next 5 minutes or so. Let's take a look at some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. And again, feel free to type in your questions. We're here. We'll stick around for the next 5 or so minutes and see if there are questions that we can all address. So let me take a look at what we've got here. Here's a question from Juana, and the question's, what previous belief was shattered by the reality of living during lockdown? That's an interesting one. Let's see if anybody on the panel wants to take that. What previous belief you had was shattered by the reality of living during lockdown? Any thoughts on that? For me, I think, go ahead, Sue, please.
I was gonna say, I'd turn it on its head. I'm so pleased that it shattered the belief that people shouldn't work from home.
Yes.
I think it's progressed the agile, flexible working agenda by 10 years in literally 1 week. And I think I'm really hoping, like, yeah, I think that some of the managers who so long fought for people not to work from home or flexibly, I hope it's proved that people are more performing, they're more engaged, they're more motivated if you have the option to work from home. So I'm just pleased it smashed that myth, I think, for a certain sector of the management population.
Yeah, I was, go ahead, Allison, please.
I was just going to say, I agree with that. We've always had a culture where people work from home certain days. So it's been probably an easier adjustment for us than for most, but I'm happy for people that I talk to that are my friends that have, worked in New York for years, and the places where they've worked have said you can't work from home. But I think that people are proving that you can, and they are productive. And then I also think it's interesting to mention that Twitter, it was either yesterday or the day before, made an announcement that all employees can work from home indefinitely.
Yeah, I would agree with both of you on that. I think there's been a lot of changes. One of the webinars we did recently, and all these webinars for the audience are recorded and they're on the Section 810 Communications YouTube channel. But we had a session a few weeks back with Mike Diadio, who's a leading executive in the hedge fund space. And Mike was saying things are changing. He knows of companies that have said, we're not renewing our office lease, but we're just not going to have people in the office, or companies saying until January, no one is going to be back in the office, regardless of what anybody's saying in the government. We're saying nobody until January. I think, to get back to this question of, what belief was shattered, I agree with both of you. The thought that we can't work remotely. Yeah, sometimes managers think they need to see people, somehow activity equals productivity. Not necessarily. And people, as a people, we are adaptive. We can go through and learn how to balance having kids or being alone in our house, having a partner, whatever it may be, but still getting our job done. It may just not look like it did in the past. Here's a question that goes hand in hand with that. If we were to go back in time prior to the pandemic, what advice would we give to ourselves to improve the experience? And again, these, if you want to look at this, they're in the questions. If we were to go back in time prior to the pandemic, what advice would we give ourselves to improve our experience during this lockdown? Any thoughts on that from the panel?
Hi, Jeff. I would just say my usual thing, planning, proper planning. When everyone was saying that it's just not for a long time, it's short period, I said no, it's for a long time. Just take your your monitors home. I don't know what was it, but I had a feeling that it's for a long time, and I did see people who had doubts that it's not gonna last, but somehow it's just be productive and plan ahead regardless of whatever you think of. Sometimes you actually need to plan a long time ahead. I'm glad that we did it with our company actually in Russia. Yes. Our people is mostly support with everything except chairs. But yes, again, planning and yeah.
I would agree with that. The only thing I would add, if I had to go back before the pandemic and give myself some advice to improve my experience, I would say I should always keep 5 months worth of toilet paper in my house at all times. That would be my only advice to myself, because in 3 months I still haven't found any in the stores. So it's certainly a crazy time. But these are good questions. We'll give it a moment to see if any other questions come in. But As we're doing that, any final thoughts for the audience? Sue, I'll start with you. Any final comments or suggestions?
I think just reflecting on that great question that was asked, for me, it was my parents in terms of what they needed to do to get shopping, to get medicines, and to get access to their bank. It really showed me the need to constantly upskill yourselves, particularly in the digital space, because it took me 5 weeks to get mum on First Direct e-banking. We still can't get them a slot, so I do a 200-kilometer trip every couple of weeks with the shopping.
Wow.
You know, because I can't get delivery slots for them, and it's the whole, just being so digitally savvy. You take it for granted because we do it perhaps every day, and so constantly upskilling yourself in this space. That's my learning, because it's really hard to teach someone how to use e-banking. You know, when you've got Alexa, you've got your phone, and you're trying to show mum the screen, and so that's probably my learning. But to me, to be kind to yourself and to be kind to others, because the most important thing is we stay safe. Nothing else actually matters to me.
I couldn't agree more, sir. I think that's very, very well said. Thank you. Kate, any final thoughts for the audience before we get ready to shut down?
Sure, my thought is just try to enjoy this time with the family. Try not to divorce your best one, so and be happy, and split your time together. But for me, honestly, it's the best time. I didn't expect that I will enjoy it, but to be honest, I do.
Yeah, I see you're smiling all the time. Every time I talk to you, you're smiling. That's great. So I think that's really good advice, Kate. And Allison, how about from your perspective?
I agree with Sue's points about having elderly parents. My parents are elderly. In hindsight, I wish I had set them up on something like Zoom, even just showed them how to do FaceTime on their phones. You know, it's kind of a running joke in memes where you just see the top of their heads. That's all I see. And they had a problem for a couple of days where their internet was down and their cable TV wasn't working, and we couldn't help them because they live in a place for older people and there are no visitors allowed. So we couldn't go and help them. And so for a couple of days, they had no TV, no internet, which is, you know, really difficult for them. So I wish I had worked with technology more with my parents prior to this. And the takeaway that I hope that we all come away with this from is the kindness that I see amongst people walking down the streets, people smiling at each other, saying hello. And I hope we don't lose that, because normally we're all in such a rush and we have, you know, we're not necessarily having smiles on our faces all the time. And now everyone is saying hello to each other. And I really hope that we all take that away.
Allison, I couldn't agree more with you. You know, a crisis can bring out the best in humanity and it can bring out the worst in humanity. It's a question of which we decide to embrace. And I completely agree with you. I hope that we can get back to, for lack of a better term, a simpler time, a more pure time of that interaction with people and relationships, and just focusing on what we have in common more than what we have as differences. And I think if we do that, we may come out of this happier and stronger than before. I want to thank all of you. We're a few minutes past the top of the hour right now, so we'll go ahead and close the session out. But it's been a delight to have all of you. Allison, Kate, Sue, thank you so much for joining and sharing your expertise and having your families share you with us today as we've gone through the webinar. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this series. We have one more session that we just added at this point, scheduled for June, that you see listed on screen here. And that's the impact of the virus on higher education. As more and more universities are going to online learning, what does that mean to students, to parents of students, to faculty members, and even to organizations that are recruiting students? So I hope you'll join us on June 4th for that. All the sessions are recorded. They're on our YouTube channel. And again, feel free to download that handout if you'd like some more information on how Section 810 communications can help you. With that, we wish you all safety and good health, and we look forward to speaking with you all again. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.